only reprehensible or questionable when it is advocated overzealously and when it is based on very thin evidence. Well, in this series, and in the programs that deal specifically with conspiracy, I am presenting the facts in a very eloquent way and backing it up with tons of evidence. And specifically, my whole approach to this rests on going to the horse's mouth. Because anyone can say anything about any subject. But when you go to the horse's mouth, to the letters and documents and memoirs and writings of the original members of these individuals who are very elite, they hold very elite positions in society, we're suddenly on very strong ground from a research point of view. Now, Giuseppe Mazzini, the head of the Illuminati, himself says something absolutely of monumental importance. He says, "We form an association of brothers in all points of the globe, yet there is one unseen that can hardly be felt, yet it weighs on us. Whence comes it? Where is it? No one knows, or at least no one tells. This association is secret, even to us, the veterans of the secret societies." In the movie 3 Days of the Condor, when the Robert Redford character is finding out what is going on behind the government, he's actually instructed by the CIA personnel that there's really a CIA within the CIA. We have the Masonic order basing itself on the cell structure, the pyramidical idea of decompartmentalization, but that's based on the old Freemasonic, the old Illuminati pyramid. And governments and corporations are also based on that kind of idea, that nobody in one cell has the faintest idea what's going on around him or above him or below. Now, the Duke of Brunswick, who was the world Grand Master of Freemasonry in the 17th century, understanding, like George Washington, like many of the founding fathers, and like other people who are in the Freemasons, that Madame Blavatsky is saying that the high Masons, the people who were trying to do good in that secret society, understood that it was being infiltrated by these foreign elements, and that the personages like Duke d'Orléans and Adam Weishaupt and Giuseppe Mazzini and Albert Pike were insinuating into Freemasonry something that was much pernicious and very foreign to what the original tenets of Freemasonry were. Well, the Grand Master of World Freemasonry stood up in the 17th century and actually asked for the worldwide disbandment of Freemasonry because he was so worried about that it had been overtaken. And in his own words he says, "I have been convinced that we as an order have come under the power of some very evil occult order, profoundly versed in science, both occult and otherwise, though not infallible, their methods being black magic, that is to say, electromagnetic power, hypnotism, and powerful suggestion. We are convinced that the order is being controlled by some sun order, after the nature of the Illuminati, if not by that order itself." Now, the Illuminati unfortunately succeeded in uniting with Freemasonry at the Council of Wilhelmsbad in 1780. John Robinson, who was a teacher or professor, was actually approached by the Illuminati and asked to join. But he suspected that something was up, and after researching it and not joining, he wrote one of the first books exposing them. And this book dates from 1798. It's called Proofs of Conspiracy. And in it he says that the Illuminati consider themselves strong because of their concealment. "The great strength of our order," say the leaders of the Illuminati, "lies in its concealment. Let it never appear in any place in its own name, but always covered by another name and another occupation. None is fitter than the 3 lower degrees of Freemasonry. The public is accustomed to it, expects little from it, and therefore takes little notice of it." General J.F.C. Fuller, the war historian, writes, "The government of the Western nations, whether monarchical or republican, has passed into the invisible hands of a plutocracy, international in power and grasp. It was, I venture to suggest, this semi-occult power which pushed the mass of the American people into the cauldron of World War I." And George Washington himself, in the Writings of George Washington, volume 36, we read him say in a letter, "I have heard much of the nefarious and dangerous plan of the Illuminati. It was not my intention to doubt that the doctrines of the Illuminati and the principles of Jacobinism had not spread in the United States. On the contrary, no one is more truly satisfied of this fact than I am." Now, the Bavarian Illuminati was divided into degrees, different 8 or 9 levels. And Adam Weishaupt says, "These good folk swell our numbers and fill our money box. Set yourselves to work. These gentlemen must be made to nibble at the bait. But this sort of people must always be made to believe that the grade they have reached is the last." So it's the perfect way of controlling people. You initiate them, and nobody knows what's above them until you get there. And then by then it's too late. And always at the stage that you're at, you think you've attained the total knowledge. It's a very attractive concept, very empowering and very hard to break. Alois Hoffmann, editor of the Journal de Vienna, says, "I shall never cease to repeat that the French Revolution has come from Masonry, and that it was made by writers and the Illuminati." And Joseph Willard, the president of Harvard University, waited till his retirement to speak his mind. He said, "There is sufficient evidence that a number of societies of the Illuminati have been established in this land. They are doubtless striving to secretly undermine all our ancient institutions, civil and sacred. We live in an alarming period. The enemies of all order are seeking our ruin. Should infidelity generally prevail, our independence would fall, of course. Our republican government would be annihilated." Now, there are many books on this subject, especially the works of John Coleman, who's another insider, who's got an incredible tale to tell. We have Fritz Springmeier's The Bloodline of the Illuminati, that again goes into the modern families who are related to them. And we have Carroll Quigley, a very powerful resource, the guru of Bill Clinton. In his book, Tragedy and Hope, he says there does exist, and has existed for a generation, an international Anglophile network which operates to some extent in the way the radical right believes the communists act. In fact, this network, we may identify as the round table groups, has no aversion to cooperating with the communists or any other groups, and frequently does so. I know of the operations of this network because I have studied it for 20 years and was permitted for 2 years in the early 1960s to examine its papers and secret records. I have no aversion to it or to most of its aims, and have for much of my life been close to it and to many of its instruments. Now, this book, Tragedy and Hope, is in any library. It can be ordered on the internet, and people can read what Carroll Quigley is talking about for themselves. Another great scholar, member of the Library of Congress and a major historian, James Billington, in his book Fire in the Minds of Men, The Origins of the Revolutionary Faith, he says the plain fact is that by the mid-1810s, there were not just 1 or 2, but scores of secret or secret revolutionary organizations throughout Europe, extending even into Latin America and the Middle East. It was they who, in the process of modernization, pioneered a phenomena by now familiar: impatient youth forming their own organizations to combat monarchical religious authority. The story of the secret societies can never be fully reconstructed, but it has been badly neglected, even avoided, one suspects, because the evidence that is available repeatedly leads one into territory equally uncongenial to modern historians in the West and the East. President Woodrow Wilson, in his book The New Freedom, says some of the biggest men in the United States in the field of commerce and manufacture are afraid of somebody, are afraid of something. They know there is a power somewhere, so organized, so subtle, so watchful, so interlocked, so complete, so pervasive, that they'd better not speak above their breath when they speak in condemnation of it. And Benjamin Disraeli, again, in his writings, says that the government of this country has not only to deal with governments, kings and ministers, but also with secret societies, elements which must be taken into account, which at the last moment can bring our plans to nothing, which have agents everywhere who incite assassinations and can, if necessary, lead a massacre. On April 27th, 1961, John F. Kennedy said, "The very word secrecy is repugnant in a free and open society, and we are, as a people, inherently and historically opposed to secret societies, to secret oaths, and to secret proceedings." And 10 days prior to his assassination, he said, "The high office of president has been used to foment a plot to destroy the Americans' freedom, and before I leave office, I must inform the citizen of his plight." So where does this all lead? Where does the knowledge that we have that there's occult secret societies operating in the world, how does that impact the prophecies of the Maya and the whole future of mankind leading up to the professed 0 hour and end date of 2012? In Atlantis, Alien Visitation and Genetic Manipulation, my book, at the end I have 4 outcomes. We understand that the alien masters, their progeny, their offspring, have been pretty successful in rebuilding all of their technology. I mean, we are, after all, living not only in the industrial age, but the silicon age. We understand that there's a Stargate, and perhaps even the movies are giving us updates on how successful they are about breaking through. And what would happen if they do break through? Well, I find that there's a great interest in secret society enclaves of the number 4. A lot of the symbols and emblems that they have, no, not less, the pyramid itself, is made up of 4 faces all coming to a point, 4 different agendas, all operating separately and financed separately, but all serving the top. And taking that motif, in my book I have 4 outcomes. Now, of course, outcomes there could be many, there could be innumerable. But again, the number 4 is very important. So in my mind, in my thinking, I thought it best to think of the 4 possible scenarios that seem to be the possible scenarios that are going to unfold themselves in the next period, in the next 10 years or so. And these are the burn and rise no more, which is number 1. Number 2 is, I term, bridges to Babylon outcome. Number 3 is start the fuse tector. And number 4 is the empire strikes back. More specifically, number 1 is that the progeny of Atlantis succeed in regaining all their technological hardware, especially that for breaking through the Stargate, and they prepare for departure. But in so doing, they come out into the open more than ever, startling the human race who cannot comprehend what is happening. When they're out of range, they destroy our planet and all that lives on it. Does that sound far-fetched? Well, think about it. These are cosmic criminals. They arrived on our planet, but they didn't want to come. They didn't come here by their free choice, and they haven't enjoyed it since they've been here. Their progeny have the alien DNA strongly inside of them, and they despise nature, they despise the planet, they despise the humans, and they despise the good. And criminals don't necessarily, as a matter of course, like to leave evidence or a trace behind them. So couple that with the hatred that they have for our planet, and that scenario isn't very pleasant. Outcome number 2, the masters realize that no matter what they do, they cannot vacate the earth, and that they are forever to be chained to the pit. In this case, they start ruling the world with unmitigated tyranny, relentlessly and openly. The human race loses whatever privileges, quote-unquote, it enjoyed while its utility was beneficial. Now it is deprived and slaughtered. Debauchery is everywhere, and people even turn upon themselves, sinking into chaos of unimaginable proportions, with all the dark, repressed content of consciousness in full view, without the restraint of inner or outer authority. Number 3. The good, under the weight of the yoke, finally rise up against their oppressors, actively preventing them from ever leaving and taking their evil elsewhere. To do this we destroy, that is, sacrifice ourselves, taking them with us. That's the old fight fire with fire scenario. It might sound ludicrous, it might sound heroic to somebody like Sam Peckinpah, but of course we know it would leave the earth as a revolving headstone in space. However, in the ancient past there was a scenario that very much approximated this. In Celtic legend they talk about that the king of the Gaels was pretty much ready to sacrifice himself in order to totally annihilate this evil archy that had risen amongst them, their enemy, their nemesis. On the field of battle he was willing to do that. And number 4, mankind finally discovers the correct means to the end and vanquishes its enemy with no excessive loss of life or home world. We eradicate the enemy and finally resolve the problem of evil. The beasts are slain, the damsels are rescued, and the ending is happy. Now, up until now, even with the vast majority of their sophisticated technical hardware again in their possession, the progeny of the Atlanteans are not able to break out of quarantine, out of their internment on the silent planet. The moon is not an ordinary satellite, and no man has physically landed on the moon, though probes have. The commission to build this craft to go beyond the moon has been now privatized. Paul Allen, for instance, announced his prototype craft on May 15, 2004. However, that date, May 15th, just happens to be one of the most important days for the Illuminati. It's called the Mercuralia. So at midnight on the Mercurialia, here we have this bizarre symbolic connection of Paul Allen saying, yes, I'm involved and I'm going to commission the space